Hi everyone, it's Richard from Digital Foundry here.
And I'm Dave.
And today we're taking a look at the Division in its final form running on GTX 970 and R9 390. And as I understand it, Dave, you're trying to run the game at a locked 60 FPS here.
Yes, so I'm trying to get it running 60 FPS on a consistent basis and in 1080p resolution.
And of course, I know you guys love to see unlocked frame rates here to get a true idea of the performance differential, so we are running with VSync turned off here, but generally speaking, the way we like to play, we have it on and we want that frame rate locked.
Yeah, and so the idea of what we can show here is just how much leeway we've got in order to maintain 60 FPS in, say, demanding scenes in comparison to areas which are less stressful.
And settings wise, you're running with something approaching console equivalent settings.
Basically approaching PS4 settings. I think the shadow draw distance is a touch lower, but generally speaking I had to pare back quite a few things such as shadows, a volumetric fog, and mainly the draw distance was the big kicker along with shadows in order to get anything approaching 60 FPS with these cards.
So I'm taking a look at the settings here, and it's essentially a mixture of low, medium and high. Shadows obviously takes a big hit, a very computationally expensive parallax mapping on low, depth of field medium, but there are some highs and very highs here, like reflection quality, local reflection quality, ambient occlusion.
Some of those were dialed back a little bit, like we're not using HBAO for example, so it's like two levels below. I think it's the extra streaming distance, one of the most demanding settings outside of shadows. By default that's set at 80 when running sort of maxed out, and that's down to 20, and that really helps in areas where there's lots of vehicles and other sort of objects.
And that's sort of equivalent to PlayStation 4 then?
Yes, it looks equivalent to PlayStation 4.
Okay, good stuff. So when I tested this in the beta phase, basically the AMD hardware had quite a significant advantage over Nvidia. But it was kind of interesting to see that in outdoor areas, both of them kind of equalized, while in indoor areas and cutscenes, AMD took point. Now we have actually got a game-ready driver for the Nvidia side of things here, but generally speaking, I think while the differential might have narrowed somewhat, we're still looking at an AMD advantage here.
Yeah, nothing's really changed in that respect from the beta, and indeed we see some outdoor scenes that are less demanding also has the AMD advantage there.
But in really demanding draw-intensive scenes, there's much more in the way of parity between the two cards here. Okay, so now we've got 980 Ti versus 980 Ti, but what are we actually looking at here? This is 1440p on the left and
4K on the right.
So that's quite interesting. In the beta phase, I could run 980 Ti on medium settings, sort of at about 30 FPS, but there were some areas where it crashed down to the low 20s, and it actually looks as though we are seeing some improvement here.
Yeah, I mean here I'm actually using the same settings we just saw for 1080, so trying to match console settings.
So that's actually, by and large, an improvement, I guess, over just straight medium.
It is, yeah, so things like draw distances and shadow quality is slightly higher than going for medium settings, and there are a few other effects turned on, such as the wind simulated particles.
And we've moved on to the 980 Ti here as opposed to the more mainstream cards, so we're kind of looking at the top end experience here to see what you can get, and by and large it's looking pretty good for 1440p 60 FPS, and well, 30 FPS on 980 Ti is looking eminently doable.
Yeah, there's only, I think, alpha heavy scenes in detailed areas can sometimes drop to sort of the high 20s in 4K, but most of the time it's possible to get a nearly locked 30 FPS with that, which is rather good actually.
Yeah, personally speaking, I'd be using half rate adaptive here to get a closer lock to 30 and to introduce proper frame pacing, but you can see here running unlocked how it all checks out. So it's an interesting sort of example of scalability here. Unfortunately, we would have loved to test Fury X, but AMD wanted their one back, so for the time being we're without one. But based on the R9 390 scenario, I suspect that we'll see pretty much the same thing that we're seeing here, possibly an advantage again in the indoor and cutscenes.
Yeah, so out of the two, I'd probably say that running in 1440p at 60 was probably my preferred choice over the 4K. You get a nice boost in pixel density over 1080p, and obviously the frame rate at 60. You get much more responsive and fluid gameplay than you would at 30, but the choice is there if you want it.
Yeah, what I would say though is that 1080p, even with a Titan X, you tried that, didn't you? We couldn't hit a consistent 60 FPS on the absolute max settings, and this is a really demanding game, so you're going to need to be quite careful with the settings. Our advice here, don't ramp up everything to the maximum because it's really going to impact performance. Okay, well that's all we've got for now. Please do give us a like and subscribe if you want to see more from Digital Foundry, but in the meantime, thanks for watching.